Georgia State Democratic Convention deadlocked. Brown was an ardent and an articulate proponent of states' rights in the full sense. Even his mentor, John C. Calhoun, had not been so insistent upon the right of each state to have the final word concerning implementation or rejection of any and all federal legislation. Along with his call for a convention at which to put the matter of secession to a vote, Governor Brown asked lawmakers of Georgia to establish a new military fund of $1 million to be used in order to put the state in a posture of defense. With the special fund voted and the secession convention scheduled to convene at Milledgeville on January 16, 1861, the youthful governor acted swiftly. He sent Colonel A.R. Lawton of the 1st Georgia Regiment to Fort Pulaski, a federal installation at the mouth of the Savannah River. Rated as one of the strongest in the South, it had been built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a time under the direction of Robert E. Lee. Following the directive of the governor, Lawton seized the fort. Almost simultaneously, other units of Georgia's military force converged upon the huge arsenal at Augusta and took possession of it. Federal forces made no resistance. January 18th saw a fiery resolution introduced into the special convention. It repudiated Georgia's ratification of the U.S. Constitution before declaring and ordaining that the union now subsisting between the state of Georgia and other states under the name of the United States of America is hereby dissolved, making the state of Georgia in full possession and exercise of all those rights of sovereignty which belong and appertain to a free and independent state. In spite of spirited opposition, the resolution carried by a vote of 208 to 89. Eventually, all but 7 delegates to the convention signed the Ordinance of Secession. Georgia was a free and independent republic. Official documents were hastily printed for the Republic of Georgia. Plans were made to send envoys to England and to major European countries. Bankers were consulted concerning the need for an immediate issue of the new republic's currency. These grandiose plans collapsed when delegates to a South-wide convention held in Montgomery, Alabama, decided to pool their manpower and other resources instead of going their separate ways. Reluctantly, Governor Brown and his allies yielded to pressure and agreed to join the Confederate States of America. The Republic of Georgia had survived for less than 6 weeks, but the ideas that led to its formation were alive and well. Jefferson Davis had not reached Richmond when Brown issued an order that all Georgia military units were to remain in the state under his personal command. Brown launched a recruitment drive and began establishing new regiments. He placed orders for rifles, artillery, and ammunition. Though Georgia owed token allegiance to the CSA, Brown intended to continue to run the state as an independent entity with its own army and even its own navy. Georgia's governor approached, but did not quite reach Brown's level of defiance. Neither of these executives ever conceded that Richmond had any more right to tell them and their citizens what to do than did the old federal government in Washington. Consequences of this stance were sweeping. Long before it was formally promulgated, most states had gone their independent ways in important respects. Nearly all had a special gauge or width for railroad tracks. South Carolina's locomotives could not run on Georgia's tracks without elaborate adaptation. That might add to the pride of both the Palmetto and the Peach States, but when the military material was being shipped from Charleston to Savannah, it had to be unloaded at the state line, then clumsily reloaded in boxcars built to Georgia's specifications. Continually at war with Jefferson Davis, Brown is believed by some analysts to have contributed to the fall of Atlanta and to the collapse of the Confederacy. Pushing southward from Chattanooga, General William D. Sherman and his men relied entirely upon the single-track Western and Atlantic Railroad as their supply line. State-owned, the line was built from Chattanooga southward to Atlanta in pre-war days. As Sherman moved farther and farther from the federal forces, the railroad that was the lifeline of his campaign became increasingly vulnerable. To many, it seemed obvious that Jefferson Davis could have sent guerrilla units to cut the railroad, not just once, but over and over and over again. Such a delaying tactic might have meant an entirely different end to the Atlanta campaign. For reasons wholly unaccountable to ordinary citizens, Davis never sent sappers in gray to wreck the federal supply line. Was this a way of retaliating for Joseph E. Brown's stubborn refusal to concede that his government was subordinate to that in Richmond? No one knows positively, but the weight of evidence suggests that Brown, Georgia, and the Confederacy paid heavily indeed for the governor's rigid insistence that the rights of states came first, last, and always. Likewise, during at least one period of crisis, Abraham Lincoln had his own hands full with Northern governors who, perhaps for the first time, wanted to claim states' rights as a way of evading increasingly stringent draft laws. But the crux of the long struggle over the extent of central power of a united or confederated government, as opposed to the rights of member states, always lay in the region whose states had claimed the right to secede. After the fall of Atlanta, Georgia's governor pulled from the Confederate Army of Tennessee the troops he had reluctantly lent to that army. Brown is believed to have seriously considered the possibility of negotiating a separate peace with Union forces without consulting Richmond. At one astonishing point in 1864, Brown simultaneously led legal fights against the rights of the Confederate government and sent Georgia troops to contest with Confederate troops led by General John P. Hood. Viewed from the perspective of over a century, it is astonishing that the CSA managed to function at all. Georgia, North Carolina, and other member states were almost as angry with Richmond as they had been with pre-war Washington. Seldom told in the North and virtually unknown in the South, this story of internal strife within the CSA holds a fresh understanding of some of the difficulties faced by those who decided to fight it out in the name of states' rights for the preservation of the plantation and the slavery system.